Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ozanam Take, a docu-series where we chronicle the journey of our Ozanam alumni. Ozanam spans 50 plus years. That's 5 decades, and we're all over the place as alumni. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Coach Hall, Assistant Executive Director of Ozanam, and along with
Darrell Porter, current Executive Director.
And this evening we have two alumni with us. We have William Kai, who we all affectionately call Billy Kai. He is a grown man, so it's William Kai. And then we have Kevin Kerwin, also an alum of Ozanam. And welcome you both to Ozanam Take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, good. So just enjoy yourself. You get to go back down memory lane today. All your Ozanam experiences, relationships, and so forth and so on. So we always like to find out, how did you find your way to Ozanam in the Hill District?
Well, Dr. Hall, that's a great question. And I don't quite know how I found my way there. I know that I remember my mom taking me to the AAU tryouts when I was about 10 years old over at Reisenstein. And she would drive me over there every Saturday morning, kind of faithfully. And I did that as long as I can remember. And that then going, and doing the AAU trips and being on all those teams. And then when I was old enough, started with the summer league. So I think Ozanam was in the basketball world. I mean, everyone knew about it. So it was just kind of like when you were old enough and you wanted to be a good player, that's naturally where you went.
Now, how did you find out, or how did your mom find out about the clinics at Ozanam? Do you remember?
Well, my father played NBA and ABA basketball, and he played for the Pittsburgh Pipers.
Right.
And he was pretty good friends with Connie Hawkins, and we were always going over to the Connie Hawkins Summer League a lot to watch games. And so I think, just seeing the shirt around, probably seeing that shirt, which became, just like iconic in everyone's and my memory as something that is like such a part of Pittsburgh basketball history, and I think just history in general in Pittsburgh. So it just kind of came about. I think and the one thing I can remember my father telling me was, if you want to be a good player, you need to go to places like Ozanam. You have to get out of the South Hills and go and play with players who are really, like this is kind of like what their whole life. And you're not going to get any better playing down the street with the kids who aren't really taking it as seriously. So that really, that was a big part of it too. And then once I got involved in it, it was like.
Were you hooked?
Like, it's just I think at this particular time, I'm doing a lot of reflecting about how I became the person that I am, and for good and bad. And Ozanam is one of those places that is like held up to me as a place that influenced how I saw the world and my just general outlook on the world in such a profound way. All those experiences that I had there, and I can get into those a little bit later.
Yes.
Including the New Orleans trip where we were stuck there for 3 days.
Good.
But
good.
Anyway, that's
good. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Billy Kai.
Dr. Hall and Darrell, I want to thank you for having me on as an alumni. I now really feel old, but I made my way to Ozanam sort of like in a three-pronged approach. I played for Our Lady of Loretto Grade School, and in the process, I became friends with John Bird. And John Bird was one of the founding coaches on the lower courts for St. Clair Village. And he had been sort of recruiting me to play on his AAU team or his summer league team. I went and I talked to my father, who grew up in the Lower Hill and Uptown area, city of Pittsburgh, and who's very familiar with the Ozanam program. He knew Mr. Carl Coleman, and we'd go to the Pitt basketball games as a child, and I would see Carl at the games, and he would mention to me, well, you know, we're going to have these AAU teams. Why don't you come out and try out for the team? So that's sort of how I got there, was through the AAU program with Mr. Coleman, through the summer league program with John Bird, and then because my dad, as I think Kevin was saying with his father, felt that in order for me to take my game to the next level, I had to play with the best, and Ozanam was considered the best.
So let's get into that, because you both mentioned the same experience where to get better, you had to come to Ozanam to kind of find out where you were as a player and then to elevate your game. So when you got to Ozanam, you started playing Summer League and AAU. What was happening to you mentally when you were seeing all these other players, their skill sets, and the level in which they were at within that same age group as you were?
I mean, I think the first thing you realize is that you're not the biggest dog in town, and that and that there are players that are good and or better, a lot of times in my case better than I was, and I think it's this sense of really feeling like I'm here and I'm going to play against these kids, and they're just they're kind of 1 or 2 years ahead of me, like skills wise, and it just forces you to if you're serious about it, it forces you to up your game, just like playing against anyone who's better than you are, and just forcing you to up your game. And I also think I mean, for me, it was also learning a kind of different way of playing, and learning how to be on a team with all kinds of different people. You know, I think that's where the cultural aspect of it really came in, and was as greater or as much a part of the whole experience for me as playing was.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to get into all that. I mean, because that's going to be the richness of the experiences. Billy?
Yeah, I really just played. I didn't concern myself with were these folks, from different neighborhoods, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different color, different religion. We were like in a universal language, just playing basketball. We played because we loved it. And, I was very fortunate because I played on some really, really great teams with some really, really great players. And, up until the time sort of we went to college, I really kept my own, being only 5'7" or 6", generously speaking. But, I learned that you can still be part of a team and not be the star of the team. Because when I played for the teams that weren't affiliated with AAU or Ozanam, I was the guy. I was the one who was supposed to score, rebound, pass, play defense, hand out popcorn at halftime. When I played at the OZ, I was around so many other great athletes that I knew who was going to be the person like Darrell to finish strong. And I also knew I could point and spot out to Sean Gibson because he would knock it down from, the wing. I knew that Steve Smith was going to be up around the rim. So if I put it there, he was going to stuff it. And, Daryl Rocky was going to get me the good outlet pass, and we were going to run the break. So, playing the off guard probably more in the Ozanam because of, being able to move without the ball made me an all-around better player because I could start working on my weaknesses. And, playing up against bigger people, you have to be able to play a little bit more physical and a little bit more freestyle.
Okay.
And each summer I could continue to get there. And I was able to play on some great teams with guys that played Division I and even semi-pro and professional basketball. But I think it prepared me to allow me to assess each year credibly against top competition. Did I improve, and how much do I need to continue to improve? I mean, we would go to 5-star in these AAU tournaments, and if you couldn't play on the lower court, you certainly wanted to play on the top court. So you weren't just going to get there because you were Bill Kai or Darrell Porter. You had to earn that. And I had so many great coaches like Chuck Franklin and Zonk, and I could probably name B.B. Flannery, another great coach. I mean, these guys are my lifelong friends. I mean, I still would, talk to them about their children or grandchildren, and we pick up right where we leave off. So it's a great fraternity, and it means something in this town. If you tell people, hey, from Manchester or Homewood or the Penn Hills, hey, I played at the OZ, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Good point. So, Kevin, Billy mentioned players that he played with and being able to measure himself against others. Can you go back and talk about that in terms of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was playing with guys like Will Herndon and Jimmy McCoy, Sean Gibson, Sean McCaskill, and of course Billy's brother Jules, all really great players who kind of upped your game. I mean, being around better players is a kind of a fast track to learning, because it's either like Billy said, it's either sink or swim, where you are you're forced to play better, and you're forced to, and if you're lacking in something like speed, like I was, you're forced to think of ways to come to make up for that when you're a player, which is really important, I think, athletically, and realizing like what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what your limitations are. And so playing with guys like that, I mean, those are all guys that I then saw in college, Will and Jimmy, and who I played against, and we all would be, before the game, before we played, I played at Holy Cross, and before we would play UMass, we would all meet up at the center court and just be people would be like, what are these guys doing? We would be joking with each other about old times, about playing in the summer, and even after the game, we would be recounting things. And of course, I also played against those guys in high school. But I mean, there was a real freedom to how you were playing there. I mean, because you didn't have the constraints of being in high school and having to perform, and there being these games on the line. I mean, it was still intense competition, but just like the energy around those, it was like you would turn the corner and see those lights on and hear people screaming, and man, your heart would just start pounding, and you'd go up to the game and you'd be nervous, and it was just like you automatically you just went up a level, So
so the atmosphere, because you talked about so many different things there. So let's talk about the atmosphere of coming up to Ozanam, and like you have a game on the top court, because everyone we've talked to, it went from graduating from the lower court where it was lopsided to being able to come up to Granville, which was nice and level and a very nice court. But that's where the atmosphere was at 7:45, and especially that 9 o'clock game. So how do you guys think that atmosphere helped you and prepares you for not only just that game, but as you continue to matriculate through college, and in terms of being able to survive in that atmosphere, and how electricity was like flowing through the top court of Ozanam? Philly?
I mean, Zonk laid the foundation for we were like revered in the Hill District. I mean, when we walked out with those powder blues, people were thinking, okay, we're going to be like Showtime. You know, it was like electric. And, you know, I would come off the bench, you know, because I was playing other sports and playing with other teams, and my brother was playing on a team. And I mean, just such great competition. I mean, to know that you were going to go head to head with, like, say, a Sean Miller or a Major Harris, you know, DeAndre Smith. If you couldn't get up for a game like that, I don't know what would excite you. I mean, you know, and when you run into those folks, like Sean went on to coach at Arizona, and he was back for a cancer benefit. He would talk about a play on a game, and you would like see it clear as day, like it was still happening. And you know, he was upset when he fell short. We were out at UCLA and we're playing for the championship. His dad was coaching us, and I got the ball to him on the wing, and he went and took the last shot, and it came up short. And we if he makes that shot, we go into the championship, and he missed that shot, and he still thinks about that. And it's like he had so much success besides that. But, you know, that the atmosphere of Mr. Coleman ran that organization with such dignity and respect. And he would make it a point to say, look, it's not just about basketball, it's about life. And to know that, you know, you would have conversations at practice when we would practice. And as a person that lived in the city but was Caucasian and Catholic, I took a lot of things from a cultural standpoint for granted because I had both parents. We had a very hardworking family. We were very structured. And to know that some of my teammates didn't have two parents, didn't have a routine like where they would have breakfast and lunch, or they wouldn't even know like if they could have the electricity on, things that we would take for granted. So being able to understand that different perspective, that not everybody sort of has those comforts or privileges, it really made me appreciate more that they were putting forth the effort. And there was nobody that was going to slack on that team because we were all together. We wanted to win.
Yeah, well said. Kevin, anything to add on that in terms of the atmosphere?
Oh, I mean, I think it was just this feeling of freedom and energy that kind of, you know, turning the kind of corner, and I would always park my car like close somewhere, and I would just be walking down towards the court, and you would just hear these volleys of cheers coming from them, and you would just start like, the energy would just start going into you, and you were automatically up for that game. And you know, I never felt like an outsider there. I always felt like we're here to play basketball. I mean, I never experienced anything of that nature. If anything, I think the thing that gets me now is when I think back, I felt protected, actually. I felt like no one was going to mess with me. I mean, there were times when I would drive Zonk home, and he would say, if anyone stops you, just tell them you know Zonk. You know? And it was, I mean, that just had such a profound effect on me.
Right. Well, you both you guys have similar experiences, and you know, you played for Zonk, who in the Hill District, he was a father figure, a role model. He was somebody who encouraged the younger kids like myself to work on their game to get better. And it seemed like he had that same effect on you guys.
You want to talk about that?
Zonk, no question. He had his system, and you know, John Miller had his system, and Chuck Franklin had his system. And I think for us to be able to evolve and play those different systems and be successful gave me more confidence. You know, and Rocky went to Duquesne University. I was playing baseball. I think I was just finishing up, and he was there playing basketball. And we would always fondly reminisce about, boy, he made those practices fun. We would just be running and clicking, and everything was designed to improve something that would make the team better. So we had such great depth that our practices were more difficult than the games. I mean, we had guys on that team that could have played and been the man or the guy on any of the top 3 or 4 teams that played that summer. And knowing that, you didn't have to worry about missing a shot or making a turnover. You could play confidently and just play naturally. And it was great. I enjoyed playing. I even played a little small forward because he was one of the first guys that liked to run a 3-guard offense, more or less. We would have a small team. We would play small ball, and we would run teams and press teams right out of the, up on that top court there, and it would be great. We'd score 120 some points. It would be like crazy. It's like the running Rebels.
That's what I wanted to hear. I was waiting for that. For sure.
Awesome.
How about you, Kevin, with Zonk, regarding Zonk?
Bill, you have a much better memory about all the details of every play than I do. What I remember mostly about Zonk, I was used to having these very high-strung kind of coaches who were always screaming and always yelling and just like very in your face. And Zonk's style was so cool and laid back. We'd be tied up with 20 seconds left, and he'd just be like, come on over here, guys, let's talk about this. And it was just like the coolest thing. And I think, playing into what Billy said, he would make you feel like you could actually do this. Like, this is no big thing. We got this. Whereas like I was used to this very like almost tight energy for most of my coaches before that, which was again, it had an amazing effect.
So that was a welcome change. That was like a new sort of something new that you could learn.
Oh yeah. And a part of it, and when they say that so much of the game is mental, I think one of the things, maybe the major thing I learned from him was like, just don't think too much about things, just go and do them.
Okay. Porter, you're where are you? You're fading. You're a little darker for us now. You in the tunnel? Maybe he's frozen. Okay. Well,
I'm in the tunnel. I'll be coming in the light in a second.
All right, we're gonna keep it moving. So, guys, talk about. We're on the basketball, but let's talk about what Ozanam did for you as young men. You're getting close to graduating high school. You're looking at college. What was the preparation that you were getting from your years in the Hill at Ozanam? The relationships. Well, let's talk about some of those life experiences that were happening for you both.
Billy?
From the cultural standpoint, the social standpoint, being able to interact with people from a different culture, a different race, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different communities, you find common ground. There was very rarely controversy or disagreement because somebody would say tomato and somebody else would say tomato. In fact, I treated them the way that I would want to be treated. And like Kevin said, we never felt like we didn't belong. I still don't think about anything but the content of the character of a person. And, I'm so proud of Darrell. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of so many of those folks that I played either with or against or both, because we've kept that legacy. I think we're all grounded as people. I think we all try to do the right thing. I was kind of reflecting on, is it appropriate for me to, because of my profession and career, talk about the disadvantages and the disparities the injustices and the inequities of people of color. And I think sometimes if the people don't really know that, I do know and understand that. And the reason is because of Ozanam. That put me right there to observe firsthand those inequities, those disparities. And, you know, it shouldn't make you or break you as a person so long as you stay true to who you are. I never felt like I had to be anything other than what I was, and being accepted for that and being, you know, considered an equal because you earned it, not because you were entitled to it or you were whatever the case might be. So, you know, I focus now trying to give back as a mentor. I think Darrell had me up there a couple of times to speak. You know, and I think, you know, I'm involved with other nonprofit groups, and we try to bring in people for inclusivity and give them opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. I think it's playing it forward. So for me, being given the opportunity in the African-American community through Chuck Franklin and you know, people from the Ozanam like Judy Bradley, I want to give back to people like yourselves to embrace our community so that there is more of this inclusion. So we're not excluding people from the opportunity.
Right, right. Well said.
Yeah, really well said, Billy. I mean, I'll be a little bit more raw about it and just say it affected me in ways that I recognized later on in life. Where, I mean, if I went into a workplace and uh, or a job or somewhere, a party even, and everyone was white, I felt uncomfortable. I was like, where are all the different people that, you know, that will make this whole thing interesting? Where are the different voices? You know, like this is not my scene. And so it had an effect on me that way. And I think, you know, and carrying, and I'm realizing, you know, today I was thinking about it, carrying that on later into life is I travel all around the world and shoot films all over the place in the Middle East and Asia and China. And I think how that particular experience helped me was I'm not afraid to go into anywhere and talk to people as long as you have a smile on your face. I mean it, and I feel that people who don't, you know, white people who don't have that experience growing up are at a disadvantage personally. I mean, because for me, it was like, even though I grew up in a basketball family, I was still raised in a primarily white suburb whose most people's reference for Black culture was in the early 80s was like the Jeffersons or Different Strokes. Like that is all they knew about Black culture, and not, you know, like Billy said, not having this kind of interaction with people who don't, you know, who are different than you and don't have the same advantages as of you, don't have the same privileges as you, was really, really important. In, you know, just my whole life, I think.
So before I keep going, because we're going to stay there for a moment, Porter, you want to add in onto this?
Yes, I do. One of the huge advantages I had was like reverse of you guys. I was able to interact with people from different backgrounds, different areas. So when I moved on from the Hill District to Pitt and other things, I already had that experience for me. So we have lifelong friends through Ozanam. And one of the things I can say is, you know, I got to meet people from Beaver Falls, Kensington, and, you know, Fox Chapel, Upper St. Clair, wherever you name, we had everybody from all over part of what we were doing, and it kind of helped everybody in a way that they were used to being around everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's so profound because I don't know, Billy or Kevin, if you guys know, well, the girls, we played on Saturdays. So it was really the same way for us, where we got to meet girls from Neshannock, Indiana, PA, you know, even as small as the South Hills, which is closer to Pittsburgh. but it was the interaction that made us all different. But that commonality was the bouncing ball that Mr. Coleman dangled. But his whole goal was education, period. It was just the ball that all brought us together. But it taught us at a very early age about the big word they use today, and they make it so difficult to have happen, and that's diversity. And here we are together, just four of us, right? And we're all different, just the four of us on this Ozanam Take alumni docu-series, but it sounds like we've had the same experiences. So talk about how you were able to hold on to those Ozanam experiences regarding diversity and now move into life. I know, Kevin, you touched on it a little bit already, talking about, your travels and being able to intermix with other cultures. But what did Ozanam allow and what did Ozanam give you to now feel confident enough to do that as you were still getting close to aging out and moving on to college? What part of diversity did you take with you from Ozanam? Kevin, you get to start this one.
All right. Yeah, I'll start. Well, I mean, I think when you grow up in a place where everyone looks like you and everyone talks like you, and then you go out into the world without having had experiences with other people and other cultures, you're handicapped, in my opinion. You are sometimes awkward, and it does really come down to that idea of like, you get past all of that so quickly when you're on a team, when you're playing, at least I did when you're playing basketball. You get past all that so quickly, and you find you find what you all like, and it just it becomes a non-issue at a point, which is, I think, good and bad in some ways, but it really teaches you how to accept. I think really teaches you how to accept others, and I mean, honestly, it's like there were guys that I didn't really like or get along with as well on some of the teams, but that was all, when you were playing, that was all by the wayside, and you always played to win, and for the team, no matter what. And that, I think, that teaches you a lot about life as well. And when you're moving into the world, and the richness of that experience stays with you in a variety of ways. I mean, who you deal with moving forward, what you even what your beliefs and what you think is how you should move through the world, and the kind of effect that you should have on it, that all stays with you.
So let me follow up 1 second, Billy Kai. So Kevin, so you talked about, your neighborhood, suburbia, and then you're coming up to Ozanam, which is totally a new culture, new experience, but then you drive back to suburbia. So how were you able to maybe influence some of your friends? Because you guys are all, you're growing up, so you're in your teens. So you have that to and from experience in just that scenario.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, part of it was also who you don't want to be friends with anymore, and who you realize you just don't want to be around because of how they think. And I think part of it too is just taking that experience and talking to people who haven't talking to other suburban white kids about. I mean, it sounds weird I mean, and granted, we have to put this in context. This was in the early 80s.
Sure.
So it was we're all old school.
Yeah.
So, you influence people by talking to them and by telling them what you thought. And so I think in my case, there were a few experiences where, I pushed back on a lot of people on what they thought about, and, said, you have to you know, you don't know what you're talking about, really.
Sure.
I mean, that's really what you would say. It's
Yeah.
like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. And that was because you were able to then step out of your neighborhood and come to Ozanam, because then that truly opened up your own eyes for yourself
Yeah.
to see difference.
Yeah, and in my case, I think it was also getting out of your comfort zone, and it really forces you. I mean, it forces you to get out of your comfort zone and
Okay.
into a place that's challenging for you personally.
Right.
I mean, this is all in retrospect, me looking at it like with a
Of
lens of a
course.
50-year-old, but I can
Right.
see now that that's what it did.
But we didn't have cell phones, right?
No.
So
Mhm.
we didn't have anything to text with. So we
No.
had to
5
verbally
channels on TV.
communicate.
Yep.
Yeah, big difference. Billy Kai, what you got?
Well, you know, Kevin brought up age, and you know, we're not as young as we once were.
Speak for yourself.
But in the state of mind of things, I like relating to younger people. I think that's why Mr. Coleman was successful. He could relate to the janitor like he could the CEO of a big company in the city of Pittsburgh, and have people come in and support the organization and the mission. And part of what I do professionally now is to try to use those competitive juices and experiences to position myself with teams, building teams of complementary people of diverse backgrounds to and make something special. Like Ozanam to me is always going to be special. It's part of my fabric. I wish my kids would have had that opportunity. I think that the parents of these children today could benefit from that experience like my parents did. Because again, I just feel that it was such an equal competitive environment, and nobody had any sort of predisposed notions that if you couldn't play, you couldn't play.
Right,
It didn't
that's
matter
right.
if you were white or black, you had to play, you had to perform, you had to produce. So, you know, when I listen to some of the segments of the other folks that, like us, are alumni of Ozanam, I think that, yeah, I think because of it was such a good experience, a positive experience. I would say, like Kevin, I don't want to be around negative people. I don't want to be around complainers. I don't want to be around people that have outrageous beliefs or misnotions of, you know, what people from different perspectives are. Now, I live in South Fayette now, and we have diversity in the form of a heavily populated Asian and Indian people from, again, different cultures. And I've recruited them to become members of our library board or of our parks and recreation, of our youth sports. And we would love to have the African American people represented. There aren't that many in South Fayette. There are a lot less. So I would feel sort of out of sorts, you know, commenting on that to that extent. But I do feel that the children here need to, like Kevin and I, get exposed to kids in the Manchester and, you know, Upper Hill, going out to Penn Hills, McKeesport. I think that's all beneficial for a better society, a society that can base its decisions on understanding and compassion rather than ignorance and hate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you just hit the nail right there, because we all know we're in a situation right now here in the world because of color. You know, there's no other way to put it. And the indiscretions and the unfairness that, you know, people of color, that means all of us of color, that we experience, and in particular, the African American male. And that's just real talk. And that's what Ozanam also taught us, was to just talk about what's really happening. And for that, we all were able to move into like leadership and influence. So, but I look at that, being able to do that from Mr. Coleman. So I want to shift gears and talk about the leadership that, in Billy Kai, I know you started to mention it, but let's talk about Mr. Coleman and any stories you have in remembrance of your experience, maybe one-on-one or just observing how Mr. Coleman related his leadership to where we all had this magnificent experience where 50 years later, we're still talking about it.
Hey, Dr. Hawk, can I just add on to that last thought real quickly? Because something just occurred to me. And, I'm aware of talking about this now because I don't want it to be misinterpreted in any way. But I think, connecting the dots now is like, I work in a tradition, in a fairly white industry, advertising and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's always bothered me that there's been a lack of voices, different voices. And so the company, and I had my own company for 15 years, but I just started, and I think there's a 50-person company. There are 4 people of color in the company, and it's traditionally, I mean, it's been like that in marketing and advertising for a long time. It's always bothered me, and so we've been trying to work with them to get a diversity initiative going, because to me, as a creative person, it's all about different voices and hearing different perspectives, and that makes for a richer, from where I'm coming from, a much richer product that we're putting out, a much richer experience for the people who view the things that we make. And so to me, that's really important. And I think that, putting that together now is a direct influence from my experience at Ozanam.
Nice.
I just wanted to add that.
No, we appreciate that. That's real talk. How about with Mr. Coleman? How did he influence you, Kevin, in regards to his leadership?
Again, I remember him as just a very kind-hearted, compassionate person who took an interest in every single kid who was there. I mean, no matter what, he talked to everyone. And he made a point to talk to everyone. And he, you felt like you were, at least when I started with the AAU teams, most definitely, you felt like you were part of something special. If you got on those teams, you really felt like you were a part of something special. And that is how I remember him, is making a point to talk to everyone.
Nice.
Everyone who was in the gym, he talked to them.
He may have screamed at them too.
Oh yeah. Well, what I want to talk about is this. I was one of those kids who was up at Ozanam all year round. So I had to do my homework. He had tutors. We had talent shows. We had so much culture that he was preparing us to be successful adults at a young age. And he really instilled academics come first. So when I'm doing all that, we had so many kids from the Hill District go on to college. And I just think that foundation that we were getting there at the clinics, before we had league games, we would go up there and just work on drills. He knew what it took to make players. And he knew that if you were an all-around person, you have a better chance of getting a scholarship. And, he helped a lot of kids. When I'm a senior, or when I'm on my basketball team at Bashir, we have 5 Division I players from the same neighborhood, the Hill District. And then, if you fast forward a couple years after that, there was so many more kids waiting that were developing in Ozanam, and then they went on to do great things. But look at our team. You have Tony Horn go to like Cornell's, like an Ivy League school, and then Rocky goes to Duquesne. I go to the Big East and Pitt, and Major Harris is the quarterback at West Virginia, and we're from like 3 blocks from each other. But we all started playing together at Ozanam. So he kind of instilled that in us early, and we were always talking about what college we're going to go to when we were up at Ozanam, and not anything else. I didn't really know that the Hill District was a bad neighborhood, because Ozanam gave us an outlet that we didn't know. We did so many positive things. If you would have told me I lived in a bad neighborhood, I would have thought you were crazy back then. So he shielded us from a whole bunch of negativity and preached positivity.
Yeah. Billy?
Well, I think he did ordinary things in an extraordinary fashion and better than most people, which I think is a testament to the skills and the knowledge that he passed on to me and that I try to pass on to others. He was very meticulous in his appearance. He didn't like people coming and looking like they just rolled out of bed. When you put on and you represented the Ozanam, you had to look a certain way and you had to be polite. There was always an emphasis on, thank people, show a gratitude, be humble. I remember he'd say, "Oh, you scored 20 points today. That doesn't mean nothing tomorrow. You've got to go out and that's in the past. You got to, each time you go out there, you have to, assert and play your game." And I think too that he always expressed to me sort of like a fatherly figure to play it forward and, don't just be a teammate, be a friend to these young boys and fellow men. And so like when a Bruce Williams calls me or a Bill Neal calls me or you guys call me to do something and I commit to it, that my word, just like Mr. Coleman, when he committed, he gave you his word.
Yeah.
It was true. You could take it to the bank. He wasn't going to tell you what you wanted to hear. He was going to tell it the way that it was. And I do remember him having those conversations about just, hey, did you do your homework? What did you score on your SATs? What schools do you think you would develop? Not because you want to pick a school just to pick a school. He was emphasizing you got to pick the school that's right for you. So I think that's something that now I'm trying to teach my to teenagers is to, when they're thinking about schools for college, to think about that, being more like of service to somebody, of value to somebody, than trying to be a star or, be great that way. Because again, coming back to his legacy is, I think, doing the little things well is what I believe Mr. Coleman that's his legacy.
So if you guys were talking to, and pick anywhere in the world you want to be, but if you were talking to someone who never heard of the Ozanam, so how could you describe Ozanam and create the essence to where they could visualize the picture in which you are verbalizing to really capture what you had experienced as someone who didn't know Ozanam? How would you capture the essence in a conversation to someone who didn't know Ozanam? Yep, we love that question. We love it.
A tough one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, Kevin, you're a storyteller, right?
There's so many aspects of it that
yeah,
I
exactly.
in there that it's I mean it's like it's I think it's first and foremost a safe place where young men and women can come to play. And what I mean by that is not only play basketball, but be artistic and do things that they feel safe doing. That to me is one of the most important things of it, because about it, because truly playing, when you're truly playing basketball and you're in the flow and you're in a zone, there's nothing like it. And there's a freedom that comes with that and then you add in just the whole vibe of that place with a hot summer night and those bright fluorescents and people are screaming and sweat's dripping and people are fighting and then they're playing, and then it's just this like and from that aspect of it, from an athletic aspect of it, it was just a complete rush. And I mean, I would play a game and I would stay and watch every single game after it, always.
Yeah.
But then I think from the point, from the aspect of it of it kind of molding us into who we are today, there was a real, and this goes back to Mr. Coleman, it was like, there was a real solid foundation from which everything was being done. So it was a safe place to play,
Okay.
and be yourself, but also to learn and grow. I mean, these are kind of platitudes, but I think, it's a cliche, but it exists. Cliches exist for a reason, because this place was one of those places where kids could go and be themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't think that
that's
even
great.
I don't think that even scratches the surface. I mean, I
Yeah,
would have
but
to give this like
but
a good.
if I were someone who didn't know Ozanam, based on what you said, I would want to know more, because
Mhm.
like you have me about the whole safe place. All right, you have about this whole idea of being free and being able to be yourself, right? And for that, today we don't know how many places there were back even when Ozanam was existing. I don't think there were many places where you could be as you described. So that is a great capture of an essence to want more at another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Billy?
I think that, you know, Ozanam is an ideal. It's a way of life. I think that wherever you would have it as a physical location, the hill at that time was just so alive. And that's what I think played into that atmosphere, that vibe. It was like a Rutgers Park of Pittsburgh. But I think you guys have evolved with blending tradition and modernization. And when Darrell had me up there, and you had me up there a couple times over the summer, the emphasis was more on the educational programs, the mentoring programs, the preparatory programs, not so much the sports. You clearly have athletes there. I also think that today you have more funding challenges and sustainability challenges because there's so many other AAU programs, and I think the eligibility rules have changed in terms of recruitment and playing and summer camps. But I would say that if I had to use like something in Kevin's genre of a branding or marketing, I think of that iconic brand that you have on your shirt. But I would say it's a vision that transcends and moves people to positive actions, positive energy. And we laugh. I would say they would talk to me when I run into former players and teammates. I think I shared one with you last night that we played at Notre Dame, and I was roommate with Major Harris. Well, I fell asleep, and Major picked up my bed with like some of the other teammates, put me in the hallway, and was throwing water balloons on me. And Mr. Coleman was like, "How could you do this at Notre Dame? I mean, come on, what are we doing here?" But I mean, it was so funny. It was just like teenagers having fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I like to say that to me, Ozanam was the melting pot that taught me about diversity, taught me about every different type of person. And the one thing that the after school program taught me was you have to go earn it. Nothing's like given to you. So, I mean, we worked at academic. We worked on our basketball game, but we worked on so many different things that we were well-rounded people. And then we're ready to move into the, adult world.
Yeah. Now, if you guys remember Judy Bradley, so Judy was Mr. Coleman's. They were attached at the hip, at the arm, wherever you want to lock them, they were locked. And Judy, like Mr. Coleman, she was really all about the education. I remember her saying to me and to others, and we're kids. So she says, in life, people may take different things away from you. But one thing people can never take away would be the education. So I thought that was just so profound, because as we move through our lives, you know, jobs change, you move, it changes, but what comes with us is our experience and the education that we were able to, from the academic end and from the social end, and how to relate. And right now we're like in a relationship. Like I would categorize Ozanam as culture and a relationship, because these are relationships that become lifelong, right? And I know I've known Darrell a very long time because we were really kids growing up at Walsworth Hall shooting hoops, right? And then Kevin and Billy, I meet you guys later via Ozanam, right? And then Ozanam was also a place where Mr. Coleman had jobs, right? He could hire his players and kids from the Ozanam to learn how to work and increase your work ethic off the basketball court, right? So Darrell, you want to just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, right now, we're trying to duplicate all the different programs that Mr. Coleman did 40 years ago. And we've been able to build up to this year. We're going to hire 50 kids, high school kids up to college, 14 to 21, to work at Ozanam for the summer and get real on-the-job training. Part of that, we have the Hall Pass where we work on leadership. We do the Breakfast Club where they can work on skill development. And then we do mental health groups so they can work on their mental things that maybe Mr. Coleman gave us all that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Coach.
You're on mute, Kevin.
You broke up on the mental health part. I'm actually really interested to hear.
Okay, so we would have the kids come and we'd do mental health groups. So the boys would do a group, the girls would do a group, and then they could talk about different things. And they did role playing. They could actually see stuff happen and know how to react to it. So if it happened to them, they would know what to do. Or if it already happened to them, they would be able to teach some other kids some of the things that they did to help them through it. So the mental health groups was like taking it to another level. And then we were able to get some kids who needed individual stuff, and it just turned into something so powerful. And we're just always trying to add something new to help the kids.
And these are professionals. Kevin Jordan, you know, Porter, talk about Kevin and his business and how he is now connected to Ozanam with that mental health piece.
All right, Kevin Jordan works for, or he started a mental health facility called ABS, and it's in East Liberty, and they primarily try to work with African Americans who normally don't go get mental health services. And he's trying to encourage them to do more of it, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like cycles and generations and cycles of people who foaming at the mouth before things. And I mean, it does a wonderful job for our kids. I mean, every kid who comes in our summer program leaves out a better person just because of the mental health stuff that we do.
Yeah, and I also want to add, we do a youth leadership conference every year. Obviously, this will be different, but what, you know, is very profound. You know, the last one we did, we had Brenda Tate. She's a former police officer, and she brought 2 other present officers up to the leadership conference, and she talked to all the kids in groups about what do you do if you're stopped by a policeman, you know. And so these are things that we've added to Ozanam to take it to another level, along with the technology. Like the technology piece allows us to connect worldwide and to bring people back into Ozanam. So the foundation is Mr. Coleman's. Ozanam belongs to us. Like that's the legacy that he left for us. So it's our Ozanam, it's our experiences that make up the richness of hearing your journey, Kevin, hear your journey, Billy, right? And if you're listening, we're not far off. I mean, gosh, they're just different, but it's just beautiful hearing like the themes, Like Darrell and I were on these, and the themes that we get,
Right.
it's so repetitious, which means, Mr. Coleman, he was right for the time. Like, he was right for the time, because I don't know what today would be like for Mr. Coleman, right? But for that time, we've all been prepared as young kids back then to now go out into our respective worlds and make a difference, however big or small. So for that, we thank Mr. Carl Coleman and Judy and Sharon and Rose and everyone. Porter, you want to add anything or ask any more questions of them before we wrap it up?
Oh yeah. So, who was your rival team when you played up on the big court? Because when you played on a younger court, okay, but when you moved up to the evening game, everybody has that rival team that can't wait till we play them, or we play them, it's going to be so packed. Better get to the game at 6:30 so there'll be space. So, who was your rival team, guys?
Billy, I don't remember. I mean, I think the year that I was on Zonk, we were pretty dominant. And I think I don't remember what team it was, but whatever team Will Herndon was on, I was always personally like that. That was always a big game.
Okay.
With Will and yeah, I don't remember there necessarily being a rival.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I do remember really, really vividly, and was that, Zonk would have one, at least when I was there, he would have one token white guy on the team. And the year before me it was Martucci, and then the year before that it was somebody else. And that was a big deal. That was a big honor to be asked to be on Zonk's team. And that was like a turning point for me, because I was like, I've made it. But I can remember there being a lot of like, there was always static. There was always stuff going on when we were playing, where fouls or whatever, and somebody undercut me, and I fell into that fence. There was that fence that was right next to the rim was there, and then the fence was right there, and I fell into the fence. Somebody hit me when I was going up, and I fell into the fence and cracked my face on it. But the entire team and the entire Zonk team got up, and it was like a bench clearing. Like, it wasn't a brawl, it was just more like a protection thing. And I felt like this is really amazing that like these guys are all here protecting me. And it was, I mean, that's just, that experience alone had such an amazing effect on just my whole life, I think. I mean, it seems like a small thing, but when you're that age, it's remarkable how those things imprint on how you see the world.
Yeah, nice.
Anyway,
no, that's good stuff. That's good.
It's a left turn. I think someone, Billy, were you on the New Orleans trip?
My brother was.
Yeah, Jules was. I think if we have time, that was actually also. Were you on that trip, Dap?
I wasn't on that trip, but I know some stuff that happened. So let me hear it.
What happened?
So that was
the story's still the same 40 years later. Let's see.
That was also a very profound experience, and a non-basket. It was really a non-basketball experience, I have to say. It was. So we were down in Louisiana at the AAU tournament. I think it was like we were in the 13 to 15-year-old age group, or maybe the younger one. No, I think we were a younger one. It was like Sean McCaskill, Jimmy McCoy. Trying to remember some other guys that were on that. Sean Gibson, and we got stuck in New Orleans. I mean, it was back when planes didn't fly every day, and there were no planes out, and there were no hotels either. And we had to cram, like all the teams crammed into 2 hotel rooms. And so we were like 3 in a bed on the floor, all like on top of each other. And we were all crammed in these rooms for like 2 days straight. You know, they were bringing us food from the condiment machines, but that was actually like the best time I've had on a road trip in a long time, because we were just all hanging out talking the whole time. um and then we had kind of a shared incident of bonding with everyone, where somebody broke into one of the rooms with us all there. Was going through, did you hear this story, Don? Where he was going through like people's pants, and we were all like cowering in the corner, and someone woke up and just went after him and chased him out. And so that was like a big, it was like a big bonding experience. But that whole staying in the hotel rooms, all of us crammed in there for 3 days, was, yeah, we all got to know each other really well. I have very fond memories of that.
Cool. Was the story the same, Porter? Was that the same story you heard?
No, you know, Sean McCaskill added stuff like, you know, they got like one other and something else, and it was 15 people in the room. Everybody's toe was in it when they were and all this stuff. But I know about it because Sean actually, I'm looking for it right now. Sean sent me the like booster thing with everybody's name on it from that team.
Oh, really?
He sent me a picture of that, and I don't know where it's at, but maybe he emailed it to me, and it had everybody who was on that team's name, because Mr. Coleman would have us go around and sell those boosters to raise money.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, it was like Sean McCaskill, Tyrone Freeman. Then, man, who's that little guard? I don't know. Anyway, if you find that, Darrell, can you send that to me? I'd love to see that.
I'm looking for it in my little.
I'll also reach out to Sean. I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Yeah, so I'll make sure I try to find that. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think the guys from the Hill like to add a little bit of stuff to make it seem like it was worse than it was.
Well, there was the guy breaking in. The guy did break into one of the rooms. Okay. That did happen.
All right, you know, I just need some validity to this. I can believe it sometimes now.
And someone peed in their pants when the guy broke in.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, Jules probably knows too.
I have to ask him.
Yeah.
Billy Kai, any rival games or any good stories that you remember before we let you guys go?
Well, I mean, I think that the coaches that I played for and the philosophies, sort of even to this day, I don't really worry about the competition. I worry about being the best. And I think that was the philosophy. We wanted our team to play to the best level of their expectations and not leave it in the gym, not leave it in practice. And if we gave it our all and we fell short, that's okay. We'll go back and learn and move forward. But I do remember a team that always liked to consider us their rival. And I wasn't sure if it was the Icemen. That sort of stuck in my head that, and I forget, like, we would hear the trash talking starting like before the game, and Zonk would just say, you know, just go out there and play. And usually at the end, there was a peep. You'd hear a peep. All that talking, they didn't play the game the way we played it. So I do know on the AAU circuit, we really wanted to beat Washington, D.C. That was a big rivalry. And Philadelphia with the Sunny Hill players. I'll never forget, I was playing, I think we were playing up. So the Philadelphia teams would have guys a little bit older than us. And I still have like a scar from when the tip of my finger dislocated in that game. So I pretty much was playing that game with like one hand. It didn't really matter because we really didn't play well, but we were playing against an upper age class. And so they shouldn't have felt so bad about beating us. But I know that made us better and stronger from when we played kids our own age group. And that was at St. Joseph's.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget that Dr. J came and watched us play that day because he was still like involved out that way in Philadelphia. And they made a big announcement. He went out on the court, and Sonny Hill was there and thanked us for coming and playing. And he just signed autographs. But I remember that. And again, we didn't always win, but I think we always played our best, and we tried hard as a team. Again, some of those players all went on. Some of them were your teammates at Pitt Durrell, and some of them played at UMass, Kevin, and some went to Marquette, some went to West Virginia, some played other sports. There's probably at least a handful of guys that you mentioned that probably were just as good of football players as they were basketball players.
Right.
Well, that's exposure. I mean, that's it. Go ahead, Porter. Go ahead, Porter.
All right, listen to this. In that same, when I'm telling you about our guys who went for basketball, then you still have these guys that went for football, like Mike Booth and Jimmy Lincoln and Sean McCaskill. Like, we had so many talented kids in our neighborhood, but the same common bond we have is we all participated in the Ozanam clinics, and we learned discipline, we learned hard work, and we learned what it took to play on the next level. And when you guys mention those guys, it just makes me feel good because we all grew up together. And then Willie Clay, he goes on to win a national championship at Georgia Tech. I mean, I could keep naming players that just came from, one neighborhood.
Tony Horn was phenomenal. I mean, Major Harris, Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, he could throw a baseball. I used to watch him play baseball. And you used to play baseball too, Darrell. You weren't bad.
Yeah. Yes, some good athletes.
Yeah, Willie Clay, Mike Booth. Those are two names now that, those guys were, everyone was amazing. Everyone.
And before that, you had Milton Redwine and every year a big high major Division I player was coming from our neighborhood. I mean, then my project that I lived in, Reed and Roberts. So I lived there. Mike Booth lives there. DeAndre Smith lived there. Then later on, Courtney Wallace lived there. DeJuan Blair lived there. It's like it just keeps going, and that's like one of the things that I'm happy about is Ozanam let us become good overall people, and then Mr. Coleman had his way of humbling people and making sure that they kept on working. So I'm not sure if it happened with you, Kevin, but he used to put a few words together, and we knew that he was serious. He was hard nosed, and he was old school.
Yeah, he had that kind of sometimes I call it these days like tender aggression. He was very, you knew that he cared about you, but he wasn't afraid to tell you how he felt and what, and at the time tell you what you needed to do.
Yeah.
And then now let me tell you one other thing he used to let us know, that we weren't that good. Because the girls, Karen and Susie and all of them were winning world championships. So we go to Philadelphia. We beat Sonny Hill. I knew how bad that was like a rival. We beat Sonny Hill, come back with a trophy. He's like, man, I don't want that trophy. I got world championships up here. That's just a little regional. So when I thought I did something, boy, he let me know that I didn't yet.
Yeah. Mr. Coleman was, he transcended time back then. He totally transcended time, and he created us as leaders, and, for Darrell and I to have that opportunity to influence generations, including his daughter and his son. That's just incredible. And I mean, I'm sure for Darrell to be able to have his daughter and son come to Ozanam, I mean, and then to lead it, that has to be even more special to have those
it
kind of memories.
definitely make me feel good because I got those pictures of those kids when Michaela was like 9 years old, and Desi Oliver was 9, and Tori was maybe 10, and every one of those girls came to our program and go on to play, high major Division I basketball. So we were able to repeat what Mr. Coleman did, and especially when you see your kids go through it, I mean, that puts the little extra cherry on the top.
Yeah. Well, it's been a wonderful going back down Ozanam Lane to listen to your stories and to watch your faces light up. Right? I mean, that is just it. The faces do more than what you say, because it takes we can see you're right back there. And that's the whole story. As Darrell like to say, like, we're going to show these to this generation because Ozanam is history. This is history that they're going to listen to and be able to compare what they're going through now and what they're hearing. But to see your faces light up, I mean, pictures totally worth 1,000 words. All right, Kevin.
Oh, I mean, I don't get back to Pittsburgh as much as I should, but the last time I was back for an event with my father, and I was staying downtown, and I had a rental car, and my girlfriend said, "Well, what do you want to go see?" I said, "We're going up to the Hill District. I want to go see that. I want to go see the upper court." That's the first place we went.
Yeah,
I went up there and I told her all of it. She was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you play basketball here." I'm like, "Oh, you don't understand what it was like." But we went right up there, yeah.
Well, she could see your face because it just lights up. It just truly, like the Billy Kai, your face, it just lights up. I mean, all of us.
I was just thinking of Henry Chapman, man. He was like my backcourt mate, and he got inducted into the Hall of Fame for the City League. And I just say, when I run into him on the street, he goes, Will Kai, Will Kai, Will Kai. Come on, are you kidding me?
Oh.
Hey, Henry's coming on tomorrow, so I'm gonna ask him about you.
They would shoot craps. I mean, they like to gamble, play cards. I didn't do any of that stuff, but I learned.
Oh, well, guys, you know what? We just want to thank you for spending time with us. It's incredible to see our Ozanam alum and to listen to the journeys that you all experienced and how you took it into your lives and influence other people and your children. So we just thank you. Porter, you want to just give your last words or what have you?
Yeah, like Doc said, I get to live memory lane, and then I always have a connection with people who can't come on the show. So when it's a name, it's like, oh, I remember Billy. He was hard-nosed. He played hard. He ran the show, man. If you were open, he was getting you to rock. Kevin was hit the boards and could shoot, and he could do it all. Like, I can remember your guys' game like it was last week instead of 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So it always makes me feel good to be on these calls because I always learn something that I didn't know. And then I'm always smiling because I know the stories. I know what you're going to say. I knew Kevin was going to bring up the New Orleans trip. I had that in my back pocket. If he didn't say anything, then I would have brought it out my back pocket. But he showed all his cards real quick. He showed all his cards. And then for Billy to come back and talk to our kids and tell them what Ozanam meant for him and tell them about, his choice of life work, and they could do it too. We have living legends that could be the example, and now we'll have it, on video, oral history. So now a kid can, if they come to after school program, don't have homework, guess what? Watch this. Do this. And now we can use this as education and, to look back down memory lane.
Yeah. So as we are Mr. Coleman living legacies, again, we say thank you for your time. And for Darrell Porter, our Executive Director of Ozanam, I am Dr. Karen Coach Hall. And we thank you both for spending time with Ozanam Take. Take
Thank
care,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
You're
I'll
welcome.
send you guys a
It's an honor.
copy later tonight.
It's an honor and a privilege. Seriously. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Take care.